The hidden cost of goodness. There's a tragedy that plays out in silence, every day, in every office, classroom, relationship, and conversation. It is the downfall of those who believe that being good is enough to be respected. It is the quiet collapse of those who believe explaining themselves will bring understanding. It is the slow erosion of power in people who give their emotions freely to those who haven't earned the right to witness them. This is not a story of evil. It's a story of innocence turned into invisibility. And if you've ever felt unseen, disrespected, overlooked, or used, then this is your story. In his book, The 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene offers us a brutal truth. Power does not favor the overly kind, the overly transparent, or the overly emotional. It favors those who understand human nature in its raw, unpolished form. Those who know that perception often outweighs intention. This essay will explore 3 specific behaviors that, if left unchecked, will drain your influence, damage your self-respect, and render you powerless, even if you have the best of intentions. But this isn't just about identifying problems. By the end, we'll explore what to do instead, how to reclaim your power without becoming cold or cruel, but with boundaries, clarity, and silent strength. Part 1. We are told from a young age that kindness is the highest virtue, that to be good is to be liked, and to be liked is to be rewarded. This lesson is fed to us in fairy tales, in classrooms, in the smiling approval of adults when we share our toys or stay quiet when treated unfairly. But the truth is, the world does not operate by the rules of a playground. The real world rewards power. There is a tyranny in being too nice. It disguises itself as moral superiority, but ends in emotional servitude. It tells you to stay soft in a world that honors sharpness. It convinces you that saying yes makes you valuable, while every yes chips away at your boundaries. Let me tell you about Darren. He was the most helpful person in his office, always available, always willing to stay late, always taking on extra work when others slacked. People liked him. They smiled at him, praised him in passing, but when promotion time came, he was overlooked. In Robert Greene's words, too much courtesy may be interpreted as weakness. Darren had unknowingly placed himself in the category of the dependable helper. Useful, but not formidable. His kindness had become expected, and in being expected, it became invisible. The harsh truth is that people do not value what they can always access freely. Darren was always available, and so he became ignorable. His willingness to serve became a background noise, taken for granted and dismissed. Kindness is a beautiful quality when it is intentional, when it is bounded. But niceness, in the way most people practice it, is often a mask for fear. The fear of not being liked, the fear of conflict, the fear of being seen as difficult, and fear has no place in power. Another man I knew, Jamal, started his business with the intention of doing good. He undercharged clients, offered too many discounts, and absorbed blame to keep everyone happy. Within 2 years, he was burnt out, broke, and bitter. Not because he wasn't good at his work, but because he misunderstood what kindness means in a world driven by leverage. Greene warns us, do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. But neither should you make yourself a public square where anyone can walk in, use you, and leave their footprints behind. The tyranny of niceness is this. It keeps you on your knees while convincing you that you are standing tall. It whispers that martyrdom is noble, even as your soul bleeds from 1,000 little cuts. So what do? You redefine kindness. You treat it as a gift, not a currency. You learn to say no without guilt. You let your silence carry weight. You remember that respect does not come from being agreeable. It comes from being solid, steady, unshakable. You become someone whose time and approval must be earned, not assumed. Because the truth is, people will test your limits, and if you show them you have none, they will take everything. That's the tyranny of niceness, a smiling betrayal of your own power. Part 2. The curse of over-explanation. How defensiveness erodes respect. There is something deeply human about the need to explain ourselves, to be understood, to be seen clearly. But in the game of power, the urge to explain can be your undoing. It signals insecurity, it undermines mystery, and it opens the door for others to question your worth. Consider this. The moment you begin to defend your actions excessively, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer acting from strength. You are reacting from fear. And in a world governed by perception, the person who appears unsure is treated as weak, no matter how strong their arguments may be. Let's meet Elena. She was brilliant, sharp, resourceful, but she had a flaw. She couldn't tolerate being misunderstood. If a colleague questioned her decision, she would launch into a lengthy explanation, rephrasing her intentions, softening the message, trying to win their approval. It was exhausting for her and for them. One day, during a company meeting, Elena made a bold proposal. It was met with silence. Then one executive said, "I'm not sure this is the right direction." And so, Elena did what she always did. She began explaining. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, clarifying her logic, appealing to reason, trying to fix a perception that hadn't even solidified yet. When she finished, the room was quiet again, but something had shifted, not in her favor. What she thought was strength, clarity, thoroughness, transparency, was interpreted as defensiveness, desperation. Robert Greene advises, always say less than necessary. Why? Because power thrives in silence, in mystery, in leaving others uncertain. When you speak too much, you reveal your inner workings. You give away your leverage. You show your need to be seen in a particular light. And that need becomes a weakness others can exploit. Imagine two people walk into a room. One sits quietly, observing. The other starts speaking rapidly, explaining their role, their past achievements, their intentions. Who holds the power in that moment? The one who speaks less, the one who lets others wonder. Greene's Law 4, always say less than necessary, isn't just about being mysterious. It's about managing energy, maintaining gravity, protecting your presence. When you over-explain, you hand others the power to interpret, judge, and redefine you. You are no longer in control of your image. You are inviting scrutiny. You are seeking approval. Approval is a dangerous currency in the power game. Here's what over-explanation communicates subconsciously. I am uncertain about myself. I need you to agree with me. I am afraid you might reject me. And when others sense this, even if only intuitively, they begin to see you differently. Not as a leader, not as an authority, but as someone who can be questioned and perhaps controlled. Silence, on the other hand, communicates calm, control, mystery. It says, I know who I am. I don't owe you anything. I move by design, not by impulse. Now, This doesn't mean you become cold or aloof. It means you become precise, strategic, intentional. You learn to speak like a scalpel, clean, measured, effective, rather than a flood trying to drown out every misunderstanding. Elena eventually learned this. In her final year at the company, she made another bold proposal, this time followed by a single sentence. "Let me know if you have questions." She stood in silence after that, and the silence echoed with confidence. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause, ask why, ask who you're trying to impress, ask if you're defending truth or protecting fear. Because in most cases, your power is not in what you say, it's in what you don't need to say. Part 3. Emotional stripping. Why vulnerability must be earned. Not given vulnerability is often seen as the ultimate display of trust. It is the soft underbelly that we expose to those we hope will understand and accept us. In relationships, friendships, and even professional settings, we're taught that to be vulnerable is to be human, and to be human is to be authentic. It's a mantra we repeat to ourselves in an attempt to justify our openness, to make ourselves feel noble for sharing our most personal feelings. But Robert Greene warns us that vulnerability, when misused or shared too freely, can be a dangerous thing. It is an open door through which others can enter, not always with benevolent intentions, but often with a cold calculation. When you share your vulnerabilities with someone who hasn't earned your trust, you give them a weapon they can use against you. Take, for instance, the case of Melissa, a woman I once knew. She had been through a difficult breakup, and in an effort to heal, she began to open up to her closest friends about the pain she was feeling. She cried in front of them, shared intimate details of her relationship, and told them how vulnerable and hurt she was. She believed that by exposing herself in this way, she would receive empathy and support. However, instead of the compassion she expected, she found herself becoming the subject of gossip and judgment. Melissa's mistake was not that she was vulnerable. Vulnerability itself isn't the issue. The issue was that she exposed her emotional wounds to people who were not equipped to handle them. She allowed herself to be emotionally stripped by others who hadn't earned the privilege of her trust. As a result, her vulnerability became a tool for others to manipulate and control her. Greene's advice is clear. Do not reveal your vulnerabilities to just anyone. Vulnerability must be earned, and only then can it be a strength. The problem lies in how we view vulnerability. We often see it as a way of bonding, as if exposing our emotions will bring others closer. And while this is true in some cases, the reality is that vulnerability can be weaponized. It becomes a lever for those who know how to exploit it. In the world of power dynamics, vulnerability is not a badge of honor to be flaunted. It is a hidden tool, a resource that should be carefully guarded and used only when it is strategically beneficial. Vulnerability without boundaries is not power. It is self-sabotage. What happens when you reveal your vulnerability too early? You give others a chance to judge you, to exploit your weaknesses, and to turn your deepest fears and insecurities against you. When someone sees you at your most fragile, they hold power over you. And this power dynamic often works against you in subtle ways. Robert Greene's Law, 36. Disdain things you cannot have, teaches us that we should not let others see our emotional needs. They should never see us as needy or desperate for understanding. Once someone sees this side of us, they know where we are weak, and they can use it to their advantage. Instead, Vulnerability should be used as a strategic move, not a constant state of being. You must control when and to whom you reveal your vulnerabilities. It is not about being cold or distant, but about understanding that emotions, especially the raw, painful ones, are sacred. They are not for display, they are for healing. If you are constantly opening up to others without discretion, you may find yourself losing power in your relationships. People might view you as weak, as someone who cannot handle their own emotional landscape. And while vulnerability is important for growth, it must be part of a controlled process, not an uncontrolled flood. So, how do you regain control over your emotional world? You begin by protecting your vulnerabilities. You share them only with those who have proven themselves trustworthy, those who have earned the right to witness your darkest moments. You choose when to be vulnerable, and you do so with intention and clarity. Your vulnerability is not a weapon for others to wield. It is a tool for your own growth and healing. The lesson here is that vulnerability must be earned. It should not be given freely. When you control the release of your vulnerabilities, you retain the power to dictate the terms of your relationships and your emotional experience. Vulnerability, when handled properly, is not a sign of weakness. It is a manifestation of strength. But that strength is rooted in restraint, in knowing that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. It is in knowing that your emotions are sacred, and only those who prove worthy will be allowed to witness them. Conclusion: the architecture of silent strength. In the grand scheme of life and power dynamics, it is the ability to control rather than the ability to express freely that defines true strength. Power, as Robert Greene so often reminds us, is not about loud proclamations or constant validation. It is about knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, and most importantly, when to let others come to you. The architecture of silent strength is built on boundaries that are drawn not by force, but by the clarity of purpose and self-respect. In a world that rewards outward displays of power, there is something infinitely more powerful about the quiet, calm presence of someone who knows their worth and has the discipline to protect it. This is the power of restraint, of not needing to justify every action or emotion, of keeping one's true power hidden until it is needed. This power doesn't come from manipulation, or coldness, or cruelty. It comes from self-mastery, from having control over your emotions, your words, and your reactions, when you no longer need to explain yourself or seek validation. When you stop offering your vulnerability to everyone who asks, you begin to walk with a quiet force that commands respect. What does this architecture look like in practice? It looks like someone who chooses their battles carefully, never rushing to prove a point, but always ready when the time comes. It's someone who, instead of reacting emotionally to disrespect, responds with clarity and poise, knowing when to walk away, when to stay silent, and when to speak with authority. It's someone who understands that vulnerability, though powerful, is sacred. They don't give it away freely. Instead, they reserve it for those who have earned their place in their life. This individual knows that emotional strength lies not in raw exposure, but in strategic sharing, in knowing when to open up and when to close off. In every action, in every word, they embody the principle of silent power. They don't need to be seen constantly. They don't need to be heard at all times. Their presence speaks louder than their words ever could, and it is this silent strength that makes them untouchable. Not because they avoid the world, but because they have mastered it. Final problem to solve. Have you been surrendering your power through unconscious habits? What would your life look like if you began to treat your attention, words, and emotions as sacred? What you must do: choose your kindness with discernment. Explain yourself only when necessary, and never from insecurity. Protect your inner world like it's a kingdom. What you must never do again: assume that good intentions guarantee respect. Apologize for who you are to gain approval. Bleed emotionally in front of those who haven't earned your trust. Closing thoughts: by reclaiming control over your words, emotions, and actions, you regain the true essence of power. This is not the power of domination, but of self-mastery. And when you walk with this kind of silent strength, you become a force that others cannot easily ignore or manipulate. You become someone who stands firm, steady, and untouchable. Someone whose worth is known not by what they give away, but by what they hold back.